All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast, where we're jumping into a little in-state rivalry here, Louisville and Kentucky. If you are enjoying our content, please make sure to like and subscribe. We appreciate the support. But Louisville and Kentucky at Louisville. Cody, what are your initial thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to be a very fun up and down game overall. Just always a heated rivalry here. I like how it's, finally going to be getting a little bit more competitive. Last year, we got a little bit closer to the competitiveness that we like to see out of this rivalry. I know the 3 years, or I don't even know how many years it was with Kenny Payne, it felt like too many, or felt like 25. But ultimately, we're getting more of an even matchup now. And I'm just very interested to see kind of how Louisville's perimeter offense operates against this Kentucky defense that has a lot of really good individual defenders that can guard in space. Like, is this Louisville offense of Mikael Brown and particularly Mikael Brown and Ryan Conwell, are they able to get into the lane consistently and create open catch and shoot opportunities for some of these other guys like Isaac McNeely, Javon Hadley, if he ends up playing? I'm hearing that he's going to play, but I know he missed last game, so I'm not completely sure. And then the floor spacers and in Case and Pryor, Ali Khalifa. I think Sinan Defru is going to end up starting like he has been, but those guys will, they'll rotate around. So this is going to be Louisville's a really hard team to guard, but it's a team that can match up with them extremely well from an individual defense standpoint. They just have great defenders all over the floor. It starts with, I'll take Owe, Aberdeen, Mo Diabate, Cam Williams off the bench. They're just extremely versatile, have a ton of length, and I think they have the size advantage, particularly on the perimeter. So that's kind of the number one thing that I'm looking for. And, I guess another thing I'm looking for on Kentucky's offense is are they truly going to start to get going like a normal Mark Pope offense? I know they really struggled on night number one, got it going a little bit against Valparaiso, put up 100 points, but is the lack of shooting going to catch up to them against high level competition? I guess that's kind of something that we need to wait and see. Is it a Mark Pope offense that's going to continue to fire away without having the necessarily elite shooting that he's had in years past? This is a team that I think would be better served, trying to get downhill, trying to get out of transition a little bit more often. But, it'll be interesting to see it at the very least.
Marcus, what are your initial thoughts here?
Yeah, I think to kind of echo what Cody said initially, it's really fun that we actually are getting two good Kentucky and Louisville teams now facing off against each other. They're both in the top 15 in the country, top 12. I don't know exactly where they ended up ranked today. But it should be a really fun matchup, I think. It's going to be played at a really fast pace. Like Cody said, Louisville's really difficult to guard. This Kentucky team, like what we saw in game number 2, is a little bit more what we expect. I do think, obviously we touched on in the Kentucky team preview that the 3-point shooting, it has gotten a little bit worse with this team. It's a little bit more balanced on the offensive end. But I do think they're a little bit better from behind the arc than they've shown thus far. Especially Cam Williams is 0 for 5 from 3. We kind of had him as a guy that could maybe really help in that area. Yelovich is 16% so far from 3. And maybe some of those other guys like Colin Chandler shot it at 53%. So he's not going to shoot it that high all year. But I do think there's a little bit of room for improvement in that area. But I do think it's a team that, they need to be, getting downhill, attacking the rim more often than not, with those guys like Otega Owe, Jalen Lowe, he's playing, right? He didn't play night 1, he played night 2. Is that what happened? Yeah. So, he obviously was battling through that injury from the preseason, but he's going to be really important to this offense, getting other people shots and getting some of these depth shooting options, open shots. So, I'm really intrigued to see how this Kentucky offense operates, if the shooting improves at all. If it can kind of keep humming like it did in their second game, against the Louisville defense, which, that's obviously coming into the season where we had the most concern with this team, right, is on the defensive end. Can the Kentucky defense stop the Louisville offense enough in this game? And then, on the flip side, can the Louisville defense hold up against Kentucky's offensive attack, the Mark Pope offense that, is always really, really good. So, I think it should be a really fun matchup. Obviously, with both teams being where they're ranked, I'm really, really looking forward to this one.
Cody, what is Louisville's keys to the game if they want to come out of here with a win?
Yeah, I think it's finding ways to generate open threes, just kind of like what they're always looking to do. I'll be looking out for the floor spacing of the front court. If they're able to draw guys like Brandon Garrison and Diabate away from the rim more often, I think they're going to have more success. And then I just think in general, it's going to be the perimeter holding its own really on both ends of the floor. I'm interested to see how their point of attack defense, deals with guys like Jalen Lowe and Denzel Aberdeen off the bounce. They're a little bit smaller than that group, obviously, and defense hasn't necessarily been their calling card, particularly with like guys like Cal Brown. And Cottle's been a defender throughout his career, more in a playmaking sense, like strictly guarding the ball. He's not awesome by any means, but ultimately I do think they're at a disadvantage physically. So I'm going to need to see them guard in space at a high level. And yeah, besides that, I just getting out and running as often as possible, playing against this Kentucky set defense that just has great individual defenders all over the place. It's going to be very tough. So we'll just going to have to do is generate open threes and get out in transition.
And Marcus, what does Kentucky have to do to come out of Louisville with a win?
Yeah, I think on the offensive end, it's going to be really important for them to just put a lot of pressure on the rim. I think with the Louisville defense, we were a little bit skeptical coming into the season with their rim protection overall. And I think Kentucky has the athletes and the pace to be able to get out and run and really put pressure on this rim. So I think guys like Owe, this is a game where you might see him get to the line and potentially shoot, 10 or 12 free throws. If he's looking to attack real early on, I think it's just that kind of game. And I think they should be able to have success in doing so. And then on the other end, I think they need to just like kind of the inverse of what Cody said. I think they need to limit Louisville's open catch and shoot opportunities. Through the two games that Louisville has played, they have a 50.4% three-point rate. Kentucky's giving up threes at a high clip through their two games. Kentucky, granted, has played two bye games, right? And so their three-point percentage defense is 20%, which is top 20 in the country. But that's not going to be the case necessarily against a Louisville team that has the shooting, right? They've shot at 34% through two games. I think they're even better than that, honestly. And they've done that, scoring 105 points, 105 points a game through two games. So, I think for Kentucky on the defensive end, it's really, trying to limit those open catch and shoot opportunities, making guys like Isaac McNeely put it on the deck first. He really wants to just be catch and shoot. I think just make these guys have to take tough shots, right? And as like cliche as that might sound, I think it's what you have to do, especially where like you've got Mikel Brown Jr., who's a young guard that I think, with some of the experience on this Kentucky roster, you can force him into, this being his first big game, you can force him into taking some tough ones, right? Shots he was able to take last week in bye games, shots he was able to take in high school. It's not going to be as easy against this Kentucky team with the experience and the individual defenders they have on the perimeter. So if Kentucky can limit the open catch and shoot threes for Louisville's offense, I think they'll be in a pretty good spot, especially if they're taking advantage of putting pressure on the rim on the other end.
All right. And Cody, who do you have coming out of here with a win? I think I know your pick because you just recorded best bets, but
yeah, we talked about this one few minutes ago, but I like Kentucky here. I think their defense matches up with Louisville's offense, like as good as any defense can set up in the country. Of Kentucky's 43 or 40 catch and shoot opportunities that they've allowed, only 8 of them have come unguarded this year. So I do think they're fairly elite in this area. Mark Pope defenses are typically very, very good in this area as well. And this is definitely the best defense that he's had. This is probably outside Houston. Like this is probably the top like defensive personnel that I can really identify in the entire country. So I think their defense is going to be able to generate enough stops and get out in transition and score at the rim, like Mark mentioned, to come away with a victory here. I know it's going to be really tough in a hostile environment, but I am very high on this Kentucky team. I wish Jaden Quaintance was going to play. Like I'd go out on a limb and say Kentucky can maybe win this game by 8 to 10 on the road. I think this is going to be a really tough game. I know it's going to be really fast paced. There's going to be a lot of runs, and somebody might be winning by double digits at some point in this game, but you got to keep your foot on the gas pedal if you want to break away from either one of these teams. But I'll take Kentucky to win this game. I'll say by a final score of 83 to 78.
All right, Marcus, who do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to go Kentucky as well. I know Torvik projects this at a 5-point spread. I think the spread is actually 3.5.
Yeah.
or something.
I believe it's 3.5. Yeah.
And Ken Palm has us at 1. So I think it's just a little bit of a difference because Ken Palm, Kentucky's number 1 in Ken Palm, number 11 on Torvik. It's just a wide range for them.
Yeah. I think this Kentucky team, as we've touched on throughout the offseason, is really talented. Obviously, Quaintance would be a huge help. But I still think they're kind of being slept on a little bit. I still don't think they're necessarily getting the respect that they should be getting. Obviously, their opening night game, they had some woes, but this team is super talented. They have a good mixture of youth and experience. I think they have the defenders to take, to not shut down Louisville, because Louisville's offensive talent is really good, but to limit it and make life tough on them. So, I think they're going to do a great job. Guys like Owe, in particular, putting pressure on the rim, attacking downhill. I'm going to predict that he shoots. I think I already alluded to it, but I'm going to predict he shoots 10 or 12 free throws in this game, and Kentucky wins by, somewhere in that 4 to 6 range. You said they win by 5. I think that they can get it done here.
All right, we're going to wrap up the Kentucky rivalry. As always, thank you for listening to the Mainely Hoops podcast.